request from Marty Merritt, and so then I plan this out and fill it out, and a lot of times what he'll request is like advanced stuff, things that I don't know that everybody really could identify with. And I said, well, you really want to do that? And he'll say, yeah, I want to do that. I go, okay, so you show up, okay? And we do this. So this time I was requested to show the historical Takagi Yoshin Ryu. We only have so many hours together, so we can't do all the scrolls, but we could pick some pretty representative techniques from this Takagi Yoshin system. Takagi Yoshin Ryu, it developed organically. Nobody set out, hey, I think I'm going to start a Ryu. Let's pick 13 things and we're going to do this. It developed organically, and Takagi literally means tall tree, but it was a family name. Takagi, tall tree. Yoshin is shin is heart, and yo can be written different ways, but it refers to a willow tree, a tall willow tree that in a hurricane or a typhoon, a willow tree will just go with the wind, and then when the wind is over, it comes back to natural position. A strong oak, when it goes into a typhoon, resists and is ripped up by the roots, and you got to get rid of the oak. So that was the idea behind this Takagi Yoshin Ryu. There's an interesting story. I'll tell you the fast version. As a young man, the head of what became known as Takagi Yoshin Ryu met with the head of To-Shin Do, and it was a friendly meeting. And in effect, the Yoshin Ryu person was very impressed with the Kukishin weapon techniques. In Yoshin Ryu, there's a short sword, not so much big sword, because big swords were not permitted inside the homes or the castle, so they didn't even deal with that. But a short sword, bow, staff, some shuriken. But he was so impressed with the Kukishin weapon techniques, he said, hey, can I use that and teach? And the head of the Kukishin system said, oh yeah, sure. He says, actually, I'm very impressed with your unarmed techniques. It's okay if I teach that? He said, oh yeah, sure. So there was this little exchange, and even to this day, there are some different lineages from Takamatsu Sensei's teacher, and these exist today. I mean, the most famous one is Hatsumi Sensei, because I made him famous, but there are other people in Osaka and some of the other cities that are not well known at all. You really have to ferret them out. And in their, what they call Kukishin technique is what we call the Yoshin unarmed fighting, but they call it Kukishin. It's just a hangover from those old days. So I think the point of this discussion is it's all very organic. It develops based on situations that people would routinely face, and people took creative means to answer those situations.
Hardy all the time. I enjoy working with Hardy. You know, he embodies the quest for authentic knowledge. And he's out there checking things out. And I was the same way, you know, 40 years ago, when I was in my 30s. I was kind of obsessed. I'd go to the dojo and I would train with the people who were teaching me Ninpo Taijutsu, and they could make all these things work. And then I was ranging around the US. I didn't even have a dojo back in the 80s. I just did seminars. I'd show up somewhere and man, we'd have like 50 people. Ninjutsu was really hot back in those days. Everybody was talking about it. There were even little fake ninja guys that were, hey, I'm a ninja too, you know. There was a very counter attitude toward this whole ninja thing. So there were a lot of people that had become famous in the 60s and 70s with karate was the big thing back then. There was some judo around, but people, they kind of stayed in their own world. It's not like today with judo or Brazilian jiu-jitsu. This was karate. And people didn't like what I was teaching because I was on the cover of the magazine all the time. And they thought they should be on the cover of the magazine. And oh man, I remember people used to criticize me. They'd say, oh, it's not real. He just took some karate and threw a little judo in and some kali sticks and a little Zen meditation. This stuff isn't real. And that's what like people would write in Black Belt magazine. But the real people, no, they followed. They came in. So in the early days, there were a lot of legitimate challenges. I would be out there in teacher mode, teaching this stuff, and somebody'd say, yeah, but what if I did this? Or if I did, you know, and so I had to constantly be ready for somebody pulling some, you know, fast, tricky thing on me. I'm not a fan of this. It's not relevant to today. Boom. Somebody's going to be hitting this way. And so I think, you know, most of us just don't have time to, anyway, my feeling. I like to keep my elbows down, and I'm coming up from there using my shoulder. I keep my elbows down. I've got 3 kinds of footwork. 1 where I hit here, 2 where I hit across, a 3rd I start across, they shift, and my foot joins in. 1, 2, 3. So there is a legitimate place for that lunge punch. I just don't think most people are doing realistic timing. That's just my feeling after 50-some years of training. I don't think people are doing it realistically. So let's correct them. Over here, wham, wham. No, I've got here, or now these muscles are pulling the arm and the punch as I'm coming out from there. A little bit like a old bare knuckle boxer would. Yeah. When I was in Japan, I had this idea watching these old films of Takamatsu sensei. You know, this little skinny, scrawny guy. Most of the time he had a cigarette in his mouth as he's doing the techniques. Must have been a real character. But he was in China in the early 1900s. And back in those days, everybody was trying to get control of China. The Germans were in there, the Americans were in there, the British were in there. Dutch, everybody was trying to get control of China. In Shanghai and these like waterfront rough bars 150 years ago, Germans would say, yeah, we can beat the Americans. And Americans, oh, we'll beat the Germans. And you know, the Chinese were in there and Japanese were in there as well. And the little skinny Japanese guy is going to take on a big muscly American guy. He's got to use his brain. He's got to use technique. And so I think this Ichimonji was what Takamatsu developed. He didn't stand like this. He was like this. The guy came in to hit, bam, bam. He'd flip that out into the eyes. The guy pull back. Then he could come crashing back in. Ichimonji. This way, bang, here. I start to see this guy angle a little warily. So now I'm coming in Jumonji. So here's Ichimonji. Somebody gonna grab my hand. I pull back. I'm in Jumonji. Now I get a little closer. Boom, boom. I hit that way. I really believe that it was bare knuckle boxing, brutal stuff in these waterfront bars of old China, and Takamatsu fit in with that. Nobody in Japan agreed with me on that, but that was my feeling. And that's what I maintain to this day.